Good morning. Welcome to Who's Left This Week, the unapologetically progressive Sunday morning political news show for Indiana. Our opening theme is by Hoosier singer-songwriter Leslie Nuss. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers. I am broadcasting from Bloomington, and it's been yet another packed and stacked week in the news. And as someone who single-handedly puts a weekly news recap show together for Sunday mornings, I'm getting really tired of late-breaking news on Saturday nights. Won't someone think of the podcasters? We'll briefly talk about last night at the White House Correspondents Dinner. Plus, the war with Iran is about to enter its third month, and the economic consequences continue to pile up. The body count climbs in Trump's cabinet and in Congress, and Indiana Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith sees demons around every corner. I got a couple of great guests to join me in talking about all of that and a whole lot more, but first, you know the drill. This is an independent media project. We don't paywall content. We don't have advertisers. We certainly don't have billionaire benefactors. Only individuals like you keep this thing going. It is a foundational principle of Who's Left and the Progressive Indiana Network that we refuse to hide important information behind paywalls in the middle of a political crisis, even if that is not in our financial best interest. So please, if you find value in this work, go to progressiveindiana.net and subscribe at the paid level. It's only $5 a month or $50 a year to help us build the infrastructure that will pop the right-wing media bubble in this state. And if a paid subscription isn't in the cards for you right now, that is okay. You can still help out by liking and sharing on social media, commenting, leaving reviews, providing feedback, and forwarding our content to your people. You get us when you can. Mostly, we just want you here in this community of Hoosiers dedicated to making this state and its government work for all of us, not just the elite few. Please join us. You can follow me on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at whosleft.us and on Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube at Who's Left. Progressive Indiana Network's handle is the full spelled out name on most sites, but on Blue Sky and TikTok, it is PIN Indiana. Help us grow with a follow wherever you're at. Now, let's welcome this week's guest. First, she's been a Democratic nominee for statewide office twice, and now she's running for Congress in Indiana's 7th District. It's Destiny Wells. Destiny, welcome.
Hi, happy to be here on an early voting day. Get to the polls.
So glad to have you here for this. Welcome to the Sunday show for the first time. I'll be seeing a lot of you this week. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But first, let's welcome a returning regular guest to the show. You know him. You love him. It's Hancock County Democratic Party Vice Chair Chuck Gill. Chuck, welcome back.
Hey, Scott. Thanks for having me on this morning. Appreciate it.
Always great to see you here. Listen, Destiny, Army, Chuck, Navy, you too. Behave.
No football talk. We're good.
All right. So Destiny's got to run after the first hour. And since she's running for federal office, we're going to front load the show with U.S. and international stories. In the second half of the show, we'll tackle the week in Indiana news, and a state office seeker will join us. State Senate District 45 candidate Nick Marshall will be joining us around 11:30. But for now, let's start last night in Washington. And President Trump and other top officials were rushed to safety at the Washington Hilton after shots were fired near stairs leading down to the ballroom, sending attendees ducking for cover. The attacker was armed with a shotgun, a handgun, and multiple knives, according to police. The Secret Service says an officer was shot in the protective gear and has since been released from the hospital. Authorities identified the suspect as Cole Thomas Allen, a 31-year-old from Torrance, California. He is in custody and will face several charges. U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro said, saying those words still just freaks me out. Anyway, Trump, in remarks late last night, suggested he may have been the target, but keep in mind, this is a man that assumes he is the center of the universe. He also used his press conference to suggest this wouldn't have happened had the event taken place in his big, beautiful ballroom. Currently, still just a giant hole in the ground. Listen, it's very early. We don't know much at this point about the suspect or his motive. I don't want to speculate, and I certainly didn't budget time for this in an already packed news week. So, let's talk about Iran. Now, when we left you last week, the United States had imposed a naval blockade on the Islamic Republic in contravention of the ceasefire agreement both sides had just signed. Trump opened the week on Truth Social threatening, again, to destroy every power plant and every bridge in the country, even as new negotiations were supposed to get underway in Pakistan. Both the U.S. and Iran spent the week stopping and seizing ships. Iranian gunboats fired on tankers. U.S. Marines seized an Iranian cargo ship in the Gulf and then escalated further by intercepting 3 Iranian supertankers in the open ocean off the coast of Malaysia, India, and Sri Lanka. Those 3 ships alone carrying nearly 5 million barrels of crude. Iran responded by grabbing 2 container ships in the Strait of Hormuz, with commandos boarding the vessels. The continued twin blockades have left 20,000 seafarers stranded in the Gulf, rationing food and water, and even if an agreement were reached tomorrow, the Strait is littered with Iranian mines, which the Pentagon privately told Congress could take up to 6 months to clear, meaning the economic damage outlasts any potential peace deal. Tuesday, Trump announced a ceasefire extension. Thursday, he claimed total control of the Strait. And Saturday, Trump's real estate buddy / special envoy Steve Witkoff and son-in-law Jared Kushner were supposed to fly to Islamabad for what the White House billed as direct talks. Iran stood them up, and then Trump said, oh, no, we canceled. Anyway, a fragile ceasefire holds, but 20% of the world's oil supply remains choked off, and the International Energy Agency is calling this the biggest energy security threat in history. Oil sits over $100 a barrel, but Secretary of War Crimes Pete Hegseth calls the war a, quote, decisive success. Destiny, listen, you're running for a seat in Congress, a body that has largely been a bystander while the president wages this war and damages the global economy. What does a Democratic House majority actually do to reassert that authority? And if it takes until a new Congress to resolve this situation, is it entirely too late?
Yeah, well, I mean, a couple of things that we could do is we could finally repeal the 2001 AUMF. People talk about forever wars. What does that mean? Well, it means that we've been using this authority over the last decade to start these conflicts wherever, the whims of Donald Trump take us, even if it's in Venezuela. That is a very real thing that Congress can do. That's been introduced lately. As of December, it was reintroduced. Also, if we look at the behavior of Congress when it comes to the War Powers Resolution, that has been political theater. It's been very disappointing to watch, even as a Democrat, the War Powers Resolution be intentionally slow-walked when this conflict kicked off. I like to talk about the State of the Union address was on a Tuesday. Many members of Congress decided not to even attend in protest. But what was not being said was that the Gain of 8 had met that day. The Speaker of the House had been told. Everyone in D.C. on the Hill had started to know that we were going to be dropping bombs on Iran very shortly. And I was keeping an eye on it, right? Because I am in the military. I am still deployable. And when those bombs dropped, I think it was early Thursday morning, maybe around 1 a.m, it took the caucus, the Democratic caucus, almost 9 hours to say something, and then you watch them fall like dominoes. So Congress has been largely neutered through this process, and they need to take their power back. And those are a couple of places where they could start.
Well, no, the Democrats in Congress had to check with their donors first and make sure they were allowed to say anything. Chuck, you served in the Navy. There are currently 20,000 sailors and merchant ship workers in the Gulf rationing food and water. One crew member told ABC News they feel like they're in prison. What goes through your mind? Can you imagine being stuck there and all that right now?
Scott, this hits me kind of in 2 different ways, because I was actually a mess management specialist when I was on active duty. So I was in food service. I was there to take care of the crew. And the main part of food service is morale, keeping morale up on the ship and making sure the ship functions by the crew not getting ill. If they're rationing food because they can't get resupply, of critical, doing bird reps or unreps or stuff like that, that creates a huge problem. And can I imagine myself being there? No, because that's something that just never enters into the equation. Typically, if you're in a forward deployed area, the first thing that usually happens is, how do we get food? How do we do armaments and the whole 9 yards? All that should precede. But there again, that also depends on actually planning out an operation in the proper ways. And that's not what's happened here. This was poorly thought of from the jump. So I feel sorry for those sailors and merchant marine folks out there. I mean, it's not a good situation.
How long can they hold out for, and what happens if they get dangerously low? Honestly, it really kind of depends on the platform. There are
there's the option to use dry stores more, MREs even, which I'm sure Destiny and I could attest to is not the most popular thing in the universe to have. Exactly. So I mean, there are options, but they are not sustainable for a very long period of time.
Yeah, Chuck, I mean, these are like the basic blocks, the foundational blocks of military learning and leadership is the flow of what we call beans and bullets, right? And so we are dangerously running down our amount of bullets. I mean, these are, to the rearmament point that Chuck makes, lessons that we have been learning since World War I, World War II. And so that's what's so frustrating is watching this department allow troops and sailors to be sent with hardly any plan.
Well, so much of war, and going back, World War II, World War I, going back to Sun Tzu, so much of it is just like logistics, isn't it?
Logistics is key. Without logistics, we're up the river. And right now, we are literally up the river. So
you can talk bullets and bombs and armor and tanks and planes and all that stuff all day long, but in the end, it comes down to being able to keep your dudes and your women fed, right?
I mean, in my second command in the Navy, I actually worked in a combat role of combat logistics, where we went and we offloaded everything from Marines, do underway supplies, those type of things. And the first thing you learn in command and control is make sure you have supply lines set and operable. If you don't do that, you're bound to fail.
Yeah. I just want to end on this. I mean, if you look at World War I and the failure of the Germans, it was attrition, right? And so we may be, delivering the blast now, right? And be looking like we're winning this battle, but the truth be told is that we're going to be left on our heels. And when it comes to issues like Taiwan and China, we're going to be in dire straits.
So let's talk about some of the economic consequences of this war. And, the shockwaves are already hitting company ledgers and countries' ledgers. The United Arab Emirates, one of America's closest Gulf allies, is quietly asking Washington for a currency swap line to stabilize its dollar reserves after the war shut off its oil exports and spooked investors who once viewed the Emirates as a safe haven. The Emiratis delivered an implicit threat alongside the ask. If they run short on dollars, they may have to start conducting oil sales in Chinese yuan, which would be a direct shot at the dollar's status as the world's reserve currency. The same war Trump's people are calling a decisive success may be accelerating the very de-dollarization of global oil markets that American foreign policy has spent decades trying to prevent. Closer to home, Spirit Airlines, the low-cost carrier with razor-thin margins and no cushion for a 30+% spike in jet fuel, or on their seats for that matter, may only have days left to operate. The Trump administration is exploring using the Defense Production Act to bail the airline out, lend it $500 million, and ultimately own 90% of the company. The Iran war didn't create Spirit's problems, but it may be what finally kills it. Chuck, Spirit is of such notoriously low quality. They're a running punchline, and now they might get a $500 million bailout. Where's the bailout for regular Hoosiers, right? Mike Braun's gas tax holiday? That's barely a drop in the bucket, man.
Yeah, and again, it's poor thought out, and it's only worried about one particular class of folks. I mean, if the airline fails, okay, yeah, that's going to impact some things. But what we really need to focus on is if we're going to work on, actually making true sustainable economic impact, we need to be investing in farmers. We need to be investing in, getting out of situations we don't need to be in, and bailing out an airline, especially if Spirit, no offense to them, but I don't see that as a national priority that we need to evoke national resources to do that. I mean, we need to focus on other areas, quite frankly.
Well, I mean, look, remember when President Obama intervened to save the American auto industry in 2009, and Republicans spent years calling it socialism and communism and government overreach? Like, what do you think are those Republicans are saying now? Destiny. Yeah, the Emirates is threatening to start selling oil in Chinese yuan if Washington doesn't bail them out, which would be a direct hit to the petrodollar system that has underwritten American economic dominance for 50 plus years now. Can you explain to folks just how big a deal that is?
I mean, it's a huge deal with the global economies. Like, Trump's turned foreign policy into just a series of threats, like improvisations and photo ops. And so when you threaten to blow up infrastructure and you're choking global oil markets like this, and then you want to say, oh, diplomacy is close. It's not, because the truth is in the numbers, right? And we are seeing that right now with the instability in the global market. You know, we talk about bailing corporations out. It's amazing how they can find money to do this, but then they tell everybody else to just spend for themselves. And we're seeing the down economic effects downhill of this, even just on the campaign this week. I just want to give a little anecdote when it comes to the fluctuation of oil and to the market that you're talking about. Yard signs. I hate yard signs. Okay, we're getting a little political here. I hate yard signs. You can blast that from the hills. I don't care. Okay, microplastics are bad. Why are we just infiltrating the city with corrugated plastic? But let's talk corrugated plastic. $4.50 I had signs at. That's good. You know, that's with the steaks, everything. I went to go order more in this 11th hour. They said, Destiny, we've had 3 price increases on corrugated plastic. These signs are now $6.50. Down to just the minutia of your life, right? Donald Trump has now cost the average Joe that much more money.
Yeah, and you know that's money that your campaign has to pay out, but you know, I'm sure whoever's printing these signs is going to eat some of those costs, you know, pass on what they can, but they can't pass on everything. Otherwise, no one's going to buy their product. Multiply this out by the entire economy, right?
Right. One of our supporters, he has a very popular restaurant downtown. He has been sending me his invoices just to show me the fuel surcharge that he is getting to ship salami to Indiana. It's going to be more expensive just to go out to eat and have the, you know, nice little luxuries that Americans are accustomed to.
Everything runs on oil. The entire economy is based on it. You know, I don't know. I feel like we knew 50 years ago this was coming, could have got off the junk if we wanted to then. But, you know, God forbid, the oil industry completely owns one of our political parties and have their tentacles down into the other. It's gross. So let's talk about long tentacles. And while the world has been watching the Strait of Hormuz, the Trump administration has been running a parallel operation of unchecked aggression in our own hemisphere. The U.S. military has now killed at least 178 people in strikes on small boats in the Eastern Pacific and Caribbean, posting videos of the explosions on social media while providing no detailed evidence that any of the targeted vessels were actually involved in drug trafficking. Legal experts, the ACLU, and the United Nations say the strikes violate both domestic and international law, and families of victims are already suing. Trump calls it an act of kindness. In Mexico, 2 U.S. embassy officials were killed in a crash following an anti-cartel operation in Chihuahua that Mexican President Sheinbaum says she knew nothing about, and she's drawn a hard line. There is no permission for foreign agents to conduct operations on Mexican soil. The deeper problem is the implication that Chihuahua state authorities were running a parallel security channel with U.S. agencies behind their federal government's back. Meanwhile, the State Department paid its first visit to Havana since the Obama administration, delivering an ultimatum under the watchful eye of a surveillance drone while Trump threatened to just take Cuba. And you remember in January when special forces grabbed Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro? Well, it turns out at least one soldier couldn't resist betting on the operation using the Bet on Anything site Polymarket. The special forces master sergeant bet $33,000 and walked away with over $400,000 in profit, at least until this week when he was charged with unlawful use of confidential government information for personal gain, theft of non-public government information, commodities fraud, fraud, wire fraud, and making an unlawful monetary transaction. Despite the litany of charges, President Trump's response was essentially, it's not so bad. I don't know, Destiny, you serve as a military intelligence officer in the Army Reserve. A Special Forces soldier just made $400,000 betting with insider knowledge. Can you even imagine doing this? Like, what does this do to the integrity of classified operations? And listen, how's your Polymarket account looking?
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm glad they're pursuing this, but who set the example? This has been going on in the background for months. We've had leaks out of the administration. We've seen suspicious trades that have happened before huge national security incidents. So again, different rules for different people, right? We're going to take the Army soldier or officer, I don't know the details, and make sure that he pays the price. But I want to see that it sets a standard and that it's across the board. And that means that these leaks within the administration. Unfortunately, what we see, I have held a top secret security clearance for over 20 years. These are strict rules. I have to be vetted, right? They find 3 people I know, 3 more people they know. I have to disclose my foreign relationships. These standards are not being applied across the board. And then also, even when it comes to members of Congress do not have to hold security clearances. Their security clearance is being voted in by the people. So we have these huge national security issues with inside OPM that we need to recalibrate truly under an entirely different administration.
Yeah. So Chuck, our personnel, in addition to kidnapping Maduro in January, we're threatening Cuba. We're now inside Mexico without the knowledge of the federal government there, and delivering ultimatums to Cuba under the watchful eye of drones. Is this what spreading freedom and democracy looks like? Is this what you fought for?
Absolutely not. Freedom and democracy are things that have been standards the U.S. has carried for decades up until recently. Where we lost our way from encouraging defense of international waterways, and where we want to pursue cooperation with other countries and lead the change and kind of get them to get off of communism or whatever they're under. We went from defending democracy to imposing dictatorship. And no, this is not what I served to protect. This was not my oath of service to the Constitution, and not what any of us that served or serving are meant for. That's not what. Sorry, I get a little flustered in trying to say this in a way that makes sense without going off on a tear, but it's just not what we should be doing at all.
No, definitely not. And, it's really just coming out into the open, things that we've sort of been doing covertly for the last 80 years. But I want to move on and talk about some other news this week. And while the U.S. is waging a war and running a naval blockade in the Persian Gulf, Pete Hegseth found time this week to fire the Secretary of the Navy. The official story is disagreements over shipbuilding reforms, but the real story is that John Phelan refused to ignore a federal court order protecting Senator Mark Kelly's First Amendment rights after Hegseth tried to demote him for telling service members they don't have to follow illegal orders. Phelan followed the law, and Hegseth apparently fired him for it. And Phelan isn't alone. Trump has now fired 3 cabinet secretaries over the past couple months, and all 3 have something in common. They're all women. Kristi Noem, gone in March. Pam Bondi, gone earlier this month. And this week, Labor Secretary Lori Chavez DeRemer, out amid allegations of an affair with a subordinate, drinking on the job, and using government staff to run personal errands for her family. Speaking of drinking on the job, Kash Patel. The Atlantic dropped a devastating piece earlier this week detailing an FBI director who had a full meltdown because he couldn't log on to his computer, thought he got locked out, thought he got fired. His security detail has had difficulty waking him. His drinking is described by multiple current and former officials as a recurring national security concern. Oh, and days before the United States went to war with Iran, Patel fired members of FBI's Iran counterintelligence squad. His response to the Atlantic's reporting was to sue them for $250 million. And as if on cue, his Justice Department, looking for a suitable distraction, indicted the Southern Poverty Law Center this week on wire fraud and money laundering charges. The same DOJ that has targeted left-wing organizations, installed unlawful loyalists, and fired prosecutors for insufficient zeal is now prosecuting the people who track hate groups. I don't think the timing here is a coincidence, Chuck. We're 2 months into a war where a naval blockade is one of the primary strategies in the Gulf. Seems like a hell of a time to fire the Secretary of the Navy, huh?
Yeah, it definitely is counterintuitive to continuing an operation without interruption. Although, I mean, let's be frank about it. This naval blockade has been implemented in the most incompetent and useless. I mean, not useless. The Navy is trying to accommodate what they're being told. I mean, I get that, but they're not getting the support or guidance or proper support from from that higher chain of command. Because let's face it, Phelan was not qualified to be Secretary of the Navy. Let's just be frank about it. He had no business being in that position in the first place. Although that could be said for any of these folks at the national level, that none of them are qualified to be where they are. But here we are. Now, the problem I have is the replacement of Phelan is, in my mind, more unhinged than, well, I mean, I don't know. I put him on same as Hegseth to some degree, as being as nuts on some of his culturistic viewpoints. I guess I'll say that. Yeah, there's a term I want to use there that we used in the Navy, but I'll be nice. I'll just say it's just poor planning, and I'll leave it.
The guy that they replaced him, his name is Hung Kao. He ran against, Tim Kaine for Senate in Virginia a couple years ago, lost badly. He's full on culture warrior, totally on board with whatever Pete Hegseth's doing. Weird dude. Destiny. I don't know. Am I wrong in thinking that this Southern Poverty Law Center indictment dropping the same week as the story about Kash Patel in the Atlantic is some sort of coincidence? I mean, listen, there's maybe Kash can keep his eyes pointed in two directions at once, but it seems like it seems like this is a convenient change of the narrative away from him.
I mean, it can only last for so long, right? I mean, this is what instability looks like. It looks like what we're seeing, the firings, the scandals, the loyalty test, hollowed out agencies, DOJ being destroyed. Competence matters, and government was never supposed to be a reality TV show. And that is what we are seeing. We are watching reality television before our eyes. We even have now TMZ on the Hill chasing people down because of the entertainment value. This is not because they are trying to, be the guiding light when it comes to journalism. It's TMZ.
We're living in idiocracy. We're like entertained to death.
Yeah, and plants need electrolytes.
So, listen, while Kash Patel and Lori Chavez DeRemer apparently like to get altered the old-fashioned way, the Trump administration took two significant steps this week on drug policy, and for once, not entirely in the wrong direction. Trump signed an executive order directing $50 million towards psychedelic-assisted mental health treatment and ordering the FDA to fast-track review of psilocybin and ibogaine, both currently Schedule I drugs. The policy was apparently set in motion by a text from Joe Rogan to Trump, to which Trump replied, "Sounds great. Do you want FDA approval? Let's do it." The science, to be fair, is more substantive than the celebrity optics suggest. VA trials of psychedelics for PTSD are underway across multiple states, and a 2025 study found a single LSD dose eased anxiety and depression for months. Separately, the Justice Department moved to reschedule medical marijuana from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, the most consequential federal marijuana policy shift in decades, though the fingerprints of industry money are all over this, including a cannabis CEO who gave $750,000 to Trump's inaugural committee. Destiny, I don't know. Shouldn't it be Congress setting federal drug policy, not Trump's donors or, God forbid, Joe Rogan?
Yes. And let me be clear. I support federal cannabis reform, including rescheduling, a path toward legalization that would include expungements, small business access, and protections for medical patients, especially within the VA. Yes, I think these things are positive, but they also go hand in hand with mental health. You talked about earlier the shooter at last night's event. What jumped out to me is that he's actually a mechanical engineer, and he was very much thriving professionally in life, and it has probably mental health issues written all over it. So if we want to be doing that, we also need to be removing the red tape that we have placed in Congress when it comes to mental health access. Right now, if you want to bring back congressional funding to your district, you cannot give it to mental health issues because the Appropriations Committee, Republican-led, has said that we're not doing that. So I think it is a two-pronged fight, and that alternative medicines should be further pursued.
Yeah, and Chuck, so listen, the feds just moved marijuana to Schedule 3, but that doesn't legalize it federally, and Indiana still hasn't legalized it in any form, even though all of the states around us have. Are we ever going to get with the program here, man?
I have two thoughts on this. One, eventually, I think the needle will move because Indiana has this history of not doing anything more than what the federal government decides to do. So that may start the ball rolling. We saw it in this last legislative session. They did introduce some legislation and start talking about it. And it's not really an unknown topic in Indiana, but we're always lagging in things that should be moving us forward. And I can tell you, from my own personal experiences with depression and anxiety and PTSD, that, alternative medications and treatments definitely have to be thought of. And we have to treat mental health as a priority issue. And I think Disney hits it very well that we can't just look at one thing. It has to be an all-encompassing thing. And, the same point in this is that if Indiana is really going to value our veterans or value our people, then we need to start investing in healthcare way more than what we're doing now.
Yeah, 100%. So let's move on. And, we were just talking about drugs. Let's talk about the man who was supposed to be the sober grown-up protecting our institutions. The New York Times unearthed internal memos this week showing that Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts effectively invented the court's shadow docket as a tool to unilaterally block President Obama's Clean Power Plan, intervening without oral argument, without factual review, and with an explicitly prejudged outcome. Now, this is the same John Roberts who spent his early career crusading against judicial activism, handing Reagan's DOJ anti-activist talking points, and promised senators at his confirmation hearing he would merely call balls and strikes. He became the exact boogeyman he warned America about, and 79 senators, including plenty of Democrats, confirmed him anyway. But wait, there's more. A whistleblower complaint documents that Jane Sullivan Roberts, the Chief Justice's wife, earned $10.3 million in commissions over 7 years from law firms that argued cases before her husband's court. Roberts mischaracterized that income as salary on federal disclosure forms for 16 consecutive years before quietly correcting it in 2023. He did not recuse himself for more than 500 cases argued by those same firms. His response to the ethics crisis was to write the court's first ever ethics code, which, of course, had no enforcement mechanism, no body to receive complaints, and no authority to actually impose sanctions. So Clarence Thomas took gifts, Sam Alito took private flights, and Roberts apparently engaged in financial malfeasance, and these are the people responsible for interpreting the law. Chuck, irony is dead, isn't it?
Yeah, it just points to the hypocrisy. Seems like such a hard word to even apply to because it doesn't seem to encompass it all. I mean, the Supreme Court used to be the barrier against the worst impulses of those that people put in certain offices. Unfortunately, now with the way it has become so politicized, that barrier is virtually non-existent because it's not exerting its constitutional role. On average, they're letting a wannabe dictator get away with a hell of a lot more than what should ever have been thought of. Hypocrisy, irony, however you want to define it, the general mess, downfall, empirical implosion. Pick your verbiage there.
They are Republican apparatchiks in black robes, right? Destiny. The Constitution gives Congress the power to regulate the Supreme Court. If you're in the House come next January, what are you going to do about this?
Yeah, I mean, just to echo, though, what you said, it's really sad that the highest court in the country now has some of the lowest ethical standards, right? And I think Congress should be using its power to call committees to ask questions, right? That is part of their role, is to investigate these issues and to call them out on the rug. And we have seen the flow of money corrupt our politics, and it's sad to have to accept that it has, in fact, corrupted an entire different branch of government, and that is the courts. The money's corrupted all of it. Executive, congressional, courts. And so I think in Congress, what we need to start doing is leading by example. I've talked about it greatly. It is one of our platform planks that we're not taking any corporate money in raising money to win our campaign. We're getting it out of campaign coffers. And similarly, if we do that in Congress, we have those expectations of our sister branches, including the judiciary. Also, when we get a Democratic president, we need to increase the number of justices on the court. We didn't do it under Biden. We had also Merrick Garland and DOJ that, soft gloved a lot of what he was doing. We have to reform what the court looks like. And we need people to be vocal about it in DC and back home.
Yep. I mean, these guys might be stuck here with lifetime appointments. We have to do something to counterbalance that. And if that's increasing the size of the court, which we should do anyway, there's various proposals for this. It needs to be done. Let's talk about, the august body that you hope to join, the one that can regulate the Supreme Court, and that is Congress. And, earlier in the show, we talked about Trump's cabinet members and senior military and naval personnel dropping like flies. Well, Congress people are dropping too, including one literally. In recent weeks, we saw Democrat Eric Swalwell and Republican Tony Gonzalez drummed out of the House for sexual misconduct. This week, Florida Democrat Sheila Cherfilus McCormick resigned moments before the Ethics Committee was set to recommend sanctions, having been found guilty of funneling $5 million in misallocated COVID funds to her own campaign. She's also under criminal indictment and has denied wrongdoing till the end. Now, according to Axios, her resignation has triggered unexpected buyer's remorse among some Democrats over the 2023 expulsion of Republican George Santos, with multiple members now saying they regret voting to remove him before he was convicted. Santos did later plead guilty and got 87 months in prison before being pardoned by President Trump. The due process debate now centers on Republican Corey Mills, with some Democrats saying they won't move against him while the Ethics Committee investigation is still open. And then there's the case of the congressman removed by natural causes. Georgia Democrat David Scott died this week at 80, the fourth Democratic House member to pass away since Trump took office last year. All over 70, all from safe Democratic districts. Scott had been planning to run for a 13th term despite visible cognitive decline, having not voted in 6 consecutive elections, including the last one, and a rambling House floor speech about tariffs last February that ended with his microphone being cut off. Again, Destiny, you're running for Congress. You're in your early 40s, literally half the age of some of these old timers. Can you even fathom why they hang on so long? And listen, from a purely cynical political standpoint, the margins in the House are so close. Every seat, every vote matters. These deaths have real policy consequences.
Yeah, I mean, we'll just get really personal. I'm running against a congressman who's been in the office 18 years. And so he got a head start relatively young, right? His grandmother died. It's been the same family having that seat for 30 years. And I will attest that I have taken my wallops for even wanting to challenge this long-term incumbent. And so this is a culture that we've allowed to thrive within the Democratic Party. And, it's the same across the aisle for the Republican Party, where establishment politics rule the day. And we end up undercutting the democratic process of competitive primaries. And so you see that, staffs are enabling very geriatric congressmen and women, right? And I say that, I'm not saying that to be rude. I mean, these are when the recent congressman died, he was wheeled into us to, I believe, sign his reelection paperwork in a wheelchair. And so there is a whole system around making sure that people will stay in office because other people around them are gaining what they need out of that, whether it be employment, whether it be a certain lifestyle by family members. And we need more competitive primaries so that we can push these conversations out into the daylight, and so that voters understand what is really going on and that they have the choice to change gears.
Your congressperson can be doing the best job in the world. They still deserve a primary. There should still be that contest of ideas every single time. It's called democracy. Chuck, some Democrats are saying they regret voting to expel George Santos before he was convicted. I get it, but I don't know. Shouldn't Congress expel more members? I thought they were supposed to be held to a higher standard. They should be out at the first hint of any scandal. I don't know. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. I feel like, yes, they should be held to a higher standard because we, and again, I'll pull from my military experience, when we were always held to a higher standard. When you went up in rank, I mean, when I'm 84, you became a petty officer. I have laws, regulations, and responsibilities and protocols to follow. Congress should be no different. And the part that gets me is that they don't have term limits. You shouldn't be able to serve for 40 or more 40 years. I mean, it's just insane. I think term limits across the board, including the Supreme Court, Congress, the whole 9 yards, will level some of that playing field. But as Bethany's talked about, getting money out of the equation is the other side to that. Because Congress was never meant to be a career. It was meant to be a service for the country and competing ideas. It's supposed to be that melting pot construct. And we've lost that because this cannibalistic capitalism system that we have has, I want more money however I can get it, do whatever.
Oh man, Chuck crashed out. Oh, but listen, I guess, I want to say when our Constitution was written, these guys certainly did not imagine living to serve until your 80s and 90s. They were dying of dysentery in their 40s. It was completely unimaginable to them. Chuck, sorry we lost you there for a second.
Yeah, sorry. Apparently my internet's deciding to be a little picky. So.
It's all right. You're back now. So listen, we let's talk about the next one. And it's very, very naive of us to expect integrity from Congress. I mean, this is, after all, the same body now considering whether to support pardoning Ghislaine Maxwell, a convicted child sex trafficker. The House Oversight Committee is split, apparently, on the question. Now, Chair Republican James Comer did call it a bad look and said Maxwell is, quote, the worst person in this whole investigation other than Epstein himself. And yet her lawyer believes a pardon is likely, noting she was quietly moved to a minimum security facility after a 2-day DOJ interview in which she conveniently told acting Attorney General Todd Blanche she never saw Trump engage in any impropriety with Epstein. The conflict of interest could not be more glaring. Trump is the only person who can grant Maxwell clemency. Maxwell's interview was specifically designed to clear Trump, and the investigation is being conducted by a committee that answers to a Republican majority with no apparent appetite to implicate their president. Meanwhile, The DOJ's internal watchdog announced this week it is auditing the department's compliance with the Epstein Files Transparency Act after months of congressional complaints that documents required by law have been withheld. Of course, this is from the same acting AG who told Fox News 12 days into his tenure that the DOJ is, quote, not sitting on a single piece of paper. Chuck, not a single piece of paper. There are apparently 6 million pages of documents, only half of which have been released, and much of that heavily redacted. What?
Yeah, well, this is a much longer than 90-second response, but I'll just consolidate it. One, they did not follow the law properly. They did not redact those files in any way, shape, or form that was actually accurate according to the law, number one. Number two, they're still, again, like you said, they haven't released all the files like they are required to by law. And again, it's a slap in the face to the survivors. Why this is even being slow walked is beyond me. And the fact that they're even talking about a pardon for somebody like this carbon-based individual. Sorry, I can't use the word fluent here, but it blows my mind entirely. It's like, I don't care, and I've said this 100 times. I don't care who is in the files; they should be exposed, and if they committed criminal acts, they should be held accountable to that, regardless of party, regardless of who they are. Get it out in the open, prosecute it, hold them accountable. But that's the part that they have trouble with, because they know if they hold people accountable, well, guess what? They don't have as much money to run next time or whatever else goes on. So political capitalism needs to jump out the window, and we need to actually hold to our principles and get this done.
Yeah, right. Like, I don't care who was it, red, blue, green, purple, Democrat, Republican, doesn't matter. Hold them accountable. Destiny, is Trump really going to pardon Ghislaine Maxwell? And if he does, where are we meeting to riot?
I do not condone rioting, Scott, but we will protest. Look, he's done everything. I don't think anything is beyond him. And, you talk about whether it be red, blue, this is about the powerful, right? And that the powerful deserve scrutiny and they want to be above it. It's not, yes, survivors deserve truth, but we're not going to get to truth until we scrutinize the powerful. That is the 1% who are running the show right now while all of us are not in the room.
Yeah. And impunity for thee, not for me, right? They can do whatever they want after a certain point. And so a little bit ago, we talked about the importance of every single seat in Congress. And to that end, there was an important election this week. Virginia voters approved a constitutional amendment bypassing the state's bipartisan Redistricting Commission, triggering maps that would likely give Democrats 10 of Virginia's 11 congressional seats, a net swing of roughly 4 seats heading into the midterms. The campaign shattered Virginia records at $85 million spent, and the pro-redistricting side outspent opponents 3-1. This is part of an escalating national tit for tat. Trump pushed Texas to redraw maps for Republican advantage. California Democrats responded by flipping 5 seats there. Missouri and North Carolina drew new Republican favoring districts, and now Virginia flips the other way. Republicans are not taking it well. As you can imagine, one congressman introduced the Make D.C. Square Again Act this week, proposing to reverse the 1847 retrocession that returned Alexandria and Arlington to the state of Virginia, which would strip roughly 400,000 heavily Democratic voters from the state. A University of Maryland historian called it not, quote, not even a retrocession bill. It's really a Virginia voter suppression bill. Nothing's going to come of this, I don't think, but in a more realistic challenge to the result, one Western Virginia judge ruled that Democrats' redistricting push was improperly done and temporarily blocked it. But the Supreme Court of Virginia ordered for the referendum to go to voters. Justices said they would rule on the merits of the case after the election. They've yet to announce when they will do so, but with primaries in early August, tick-tock. Destiny, this is clearly payback for the Texas mid-cycle redistricting and 2 decades of Republican gerrymandering, but it does still feel a little icky to cheer for it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it totally does. No, especially as Hoosiers, right? Because we have been on the receiving end of gerrymandered redistricting for decades. We know how it feels. I see it in the CD7 race all the time, people not wanting competition. And I have to remind people, like, who drew this district, guys? The Republicans drew this district so that they would pack all of us into it like this and we would become complacent. And that is what I worry about, the after effects of redistricting. It may feel good in this moment. Hopefully Democrats can win the House, but I think it also will have effects for years to come until they can get to their decade redistricting. But it's also, I kind of feel it's the same scenario that I described with post Citizens United, that the parties have turned into the Hatfield and the McCoys, right? And they just keep wanting to re-up the other. And we are so far from what we know is right. And that is not these redistricting battles where we are just trying to win the majority of the House for this 1 year or this cycle.
And if they don't like it, right, there's something we can do about this. We can ban partisan gerrymandering at the nationwide level, but they don't want any part of that because Republicans gerrymander a hell of a lot more states than Democrats do. Chuck, do you think Indiana Republicans are regretting that they didn't go through with their own redistricting gamut in December?
I'm going to say something that is probably a little on the controversial side, but for once, the representatives and senators, well, at least the senators, listened to their constituency. The representatives didn't give two cruds, but the senators actually listened to those of us that were voicing our opinions, sending emails, and calling and all that good stuff. Now, the fact that they're getting mounted, that they have primary challenges being supported by Trump because we didn't go along with their cockamamie idea. Oh, okay, but I think this is one of those rare times where Indiana stood up and did the right thing and said, nope, we're not going along with this because it's not right. Now, again, I'm on with you. Gerrymandering should be done away with, period, end of story, full stop across the board. And it should get back to, again, about equal representation, equal opportunity for the best idea to come forward. And just like Dusty talked about, that's why we have primaries. We should be seeing those new ideas come along, and we should have fresh ideas and more energy coming into this. And the only way to do that is to reset all this stupidity and get back to what it should be in the first place. But I know it's logical. I get it, but I'm just saying.
So finally, before we let Destiny go, from election results to people who don't think we should have elections at all. Last weekend, Palantir published a 22-point summary of CEO Alex Karp's 320-page book, The Technological Republic. The too long didn't read Cliff's Notes for Technofascism. Now, Karp demands that the nation's military exists to serve Silicon Valley's engineering elite, wants to reinstate the draft so that everyone shares the risk of the wars his company profits from, proposes rearming Germany and Japan, and declares that some cultures have, quote, proven middling and worse, regressive and harmful, without specifying which ones, because he doesn't have to. The white supremacy comes through loud and clear. Point 22 attacks pluralism directly, framing multiculturalism as a form of surrender. And this isn't new thinking. The book was published in early 2025, but Palantir is amplifying it now for a reason. As Bellingcat founder Elliot Higgins put it, these 22 points aren't philosophy floating in space. They're the public ideology of a company whose revenue depends on the politics it's advocating. And that revenue is substantial. $4.5 billion in 2025, more than half of that from government contracts. Palantir's Maven Smart system, which its chief technology officer describes as, quote, optimizing the kill chain from sensor to shooter, has been used to carry out the Iran war, including the strike on a girls' school on the first day of the conflict. Hell of a smart system they've got there. President Trump has named Palantir executives to key government roles while the company recruits former officials in return. And founder Peter Thiel, yeah, that guy who calls democracy incompatible with freedom, is bankrolling dark money campaigns to block AI regulation. Listen, I don't know a whole lot about fishing, but I do know that carp are bottom feeders, and Alex Karp can eat my whole bottom.
Ew.
Chuck, They've been saying the quiet part out loud for years, right? Democracy is incompatible with their freedom. Some cultures are lesser than others. Mass surveillance is necessary for public safety. The question is whether they've already consolidated sufficient power for it to even matter what the rest of us think about it.
I don't believe that they've gotten to such a point that we can't voice an opinion to change it. I think we've seen when we as people unite in a common goal, we can affect change, even against these folks that have these, the technological expertise that they do. But the fact that they are trying to dictate terms on who's acceptable and who's not, again, ties in with some of this other nationalistic, particular subset of how our quote unquote Secretary of Defense and
we lost Chuck. I'll jump in, Scott.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, because I just want to pound my fist on the table one more time. Follow the money. This is all about the money. The concern is not so much the technology itself, it's how humans are implementing it. And the concern is that private defense contractors are shaping public policy to profit, right, from the surveillance, the targeting, and for war. And Congress needs to ask who benefits and who's accountable and what guardrails exist. And that's really hard to do in Congress when you're also quietly taking checks from all of these people. And we even see it here in the 7th Congressional District. The congressman sits on the House Intel Committee. It operates behind a veil of secrecy and classified environment, but the checks that are cashed are not classified. And so when you see 7-8 defense contractors repeatedly showing up every year, maxing out, is because they are getting theirs. And people need to wisen up because corporations are going to turn us in, yes, to a mass surveillance state. And the congresspersons are going to say, we have to because it's a matter of national security. No, they are there to protect us and to balance out the system under their constitutional obligations. And right now, they are not meeting them.
Yeah, and and Palantir and Peter Thiel, they're exceptionally problematic. I think it's beyond the money. Like, Thiel has a worldview that is inherently white supremacist and fascist, and for a guy that goes around talking about the dangers of the Antichrist, I don't know. I think it might be projection. Destiny. I know you got to run. We're coming here on the bottom of the hour. We're going to have Nick Marshall tagging in, joining us here shortly. But before we get to that, where can the people find out more about you, more about your campaign? We've only got a couple weeks ago here till the primary. Tell the folks where they can find you.
Yeah, Wells4Indiana.com, Wells, FOR, Indiana.com. You can find out about the campaign, where I stand on issues. Very engaged across all social media platforms. If you send a private message, I'm probably going to read it because I say people can take my TikTok and my Twitter account from my cold dead hands. Those are mine. And so very reachable, reach out. And thanks for letting me go, because right now I am being told that an opponent's campaign is actually bullying our campaign members who are working a polling location, and they had to leave. So again, get involved, ask questions, and believe what you see and what you hear, and let's work smarter and not harder.
All right, Destiny. Well, best of luck with that. We will let you go. Thank you for being with us here today. We greatly appreciate it, and best of luck on May 5th.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Destiny Wells, candidate for the 7th Congressional District there in Indianapolis, getting spicy there in that primary in our state here. So listen, let us now at this point turn and talk about our Indiana stories. And as such, we're going to welcome in somebody who is running for a state office here in Indiana, and that is the Democratic candidate for State Senate District 45. Welcome back, Nick Marshall. Nick, good to have you. Thanks for being with us this morning.
And good morning.
I appreciate you being here. I'm glad to have you on a Sunday morning. I know you are a churchgoer typically, so thank you for interrupting your regularly scheduled programming for us.
Oh, don't worry. I got my sermons in. Let me say that. I actually went grocery shopping this morning and listened to a sermon. So, and a little bit of piece of another one. So I still got the Lord already today.
Well, listen, I'm glad you do. You're going to need it. I think we're all going to need it here after we deal with this. Someone might have a little bit too much of the Lord. We'll talk about him here later on in this segment, or, well, a little bit too much of what he thinks is the Lord. But we'll talk about our good friend Micah Beckwith here later on. But first, I want to start in a segment I call The Crossroads, where national news and local and state politics intersect. And we were just talking about Palantir, right? A company that uses vast amounts of data to train its AI systems. You never hear about them building data centers, by the way. I don't know why that is, but here in Indiana, data centers are seemingly always in the news lately. In Indianapolis, Decatur Township residents are asking a court to overturn approval of a $4 billion Saby Corporation data center, arguing the developer used a variance of use filing to deliberately bypass the kind of full city-county council vote that killed a similar Google data center in Franklin Township last year. Variances are supposed to be narrow exceptions, not a workaround to rezone 130 acres near residential neighborhoods without council oversight. And a 30-year land use veteran warns the strategy is already spreading, with now a second developer filing a variance to build a $2 billion data center on the east side using the same playbook. This week, Indianapolis released draft zoning rules that would formally define data centers for the first time in Marion County, requiring a 200-foot buffer from residential land, capping noise at 65 decibels, and banning generator testing, but only between 5 and 7 in the morning. Critics say it doesn't go nearly far enough and are calling for a moratorium that city leadership has no appetite for. Former council president, current mayoral candidate Vop Asali says he looks upon data centers the same way he looks upon power lines and sewer lines. Now, meanwhile, Google and AES Indiana filed a proposal this week requiring Google to cover the full cost of its proposed Monrovia data center's electricity and infrastructure, meaning existing ratepayers wouldn't foot the bill. The deal projects $750 million in savings over 15 years, though let's be clear, that's avoided rate increases, not new savings. The Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission rules in December, and the outcome sets a new precedent for how the state handles the roughly $1.3 billion in new energy infrastructure Google says it needs. Nick, is the data center boom hitting down there in Clark and Floyd counties too? And what are the people you're talking to out on the campaign saying about it?
Okay, so actually we already have a data center here in Charlestown / the Jeffersonville area. And so with that, let's talk the good and the bad of every situation. Okay. So from the story that you just read, and take a deep breath because it's a lot to digest. The cities got a say on it. They got to put their input on. The council has put an ordinance on that too. So with that, we didn't get a kind of a say in it. It already happened. So that is the good of it, that Indianapolis is putting in some type of parameters to reel in these data centers. There's the other side of it too, the utility costs. We're going to beat this over the head. The affordability crisis is here. While I was listening to that sermon, I was going through the grocery store, and not only are people, going to various only grocery stores to save money, to pay on their utility bills, how do we make sure that this does not get passed on to the everyday Hoosier? And so the bills are going up. Our bills have already actually went up at least $40 to $50 in the area. So what are those people going to do with that? So that's the situation. The other good thing is the commission that had put in that area actually had a statute if they came in any place in that area that is an old ammunition plant that bought in a company, they would have to give a livable or prevailing wage, which means they would have to give a job that is above giving $24 an hour, which makes sure that you pay your bills, pay for your daycares, and also that type of any other things that might be cost effective in the area. Because the average to be making it, you have to be making $23 to $24. And that's just for an individual, not with a family. Okay. And there's still $300 in the hole. So that is the good thing, is there's getting input from the cities and the counties of what they can do and how to rein them in. But also at the state level, there has to be some type of communication to rein them in, make sure that all the taxes, they don't get exempted for a very long time, and it's not pushed back onto the everyday Hoosier. So we have to have a real conversation, the good and the bad of those data centers.
Well, yeah. So about the, pushing those costs onto everyday Hoosiers, right? Now, Chuck, this Google AES agreement is supposed to require Google to cover its own infrastructure costs, which would potentially protect ratepayers from bearing the brunt. Do you think that is sufficient to protect regular Hoosiers? And does it make people more amenable to having one of these things in their backyard?
I think that it is a step in the right direction. Do I think it is going to be a complete answer? Not even in the slightest. Because not only with the power costs for a data center, you also have to consider water and sanitary concerns as well. This is the space I work in, so this, I can give you all kinds of different ideas. But the nuts and bolts of it, these data centers are being brought in by companies that make billions upon billions of dollars. They can afford to invest in the place where they're setting these data centers. So, like, no generator, don't use generators, period. Or if you do, install air pollution reducing mechanisms that are easily available. They just have to be made to do it. And I agree with Nick. Yeah, we're taking steps, but they are minimally incremental. We need to make that generational shift to protecting the environment for public health. That tie has to be made, because what these centers do, if they have those generators, our air quality already sucks in Indiana. I mean, let's just face facts about it. And it's only going to get worse the more of these things that go in with generator backups that run diesel fuel and don't have the particulate removal that they should have. So anyway, in the grand scheme of it, are there ways to protect ratepayers from bearing the brunt of these things? Absolutely. And the power costs being, the infrastructure that they have to put in, being paid by that data center? Absolutely. And they should also pay for the water and wastewater infrastructures throughout. There are a lot of communities that need serious upgrades in their water and wastewater systems. This is a great way to facilitate that if our state would get off their butts and actually understand it and get it done. But until we get somebody like Dick in there, we're kind of up a creek.
That's a huge if, though, right? I mean, they pick on Indiana because we're gerrymandered, we're dispersed, the folks don't have a lot of power, where the voters aren't engaged, we're disinterested because our leaders haven't been serving us well for decades. They pick on rural communities because folks there aren't a lot of folks to come together to exercise power. They pick on marginalized communities like Martindale, Brightwood, and Indianapolis. Because they can, seemingly. I want to throw one thing in there real quick. There are organizations that are bringing people together in different ways. There are environmental groups that are working. The White River Alliance is a beautiful example of making positive steps forward. Rural water districts coming together. So there are options to force it politically. We just have to make our voices so heard that they can't ignore us. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but No, you're good. Well, Nick, this is one of those things, I think, that can bridge that urban-rural divide.
Yes, and so that's what I'm going to speak about here, too. Chuck is completely right. There are organizations that are going out there and doing the education piece of how to be environmentally friendly when these data centers come in there, to make sure those things come in and set up. And a lot of people don't know until they start entering the conversation. So I'll give a perfect example. It was about a month and a half, maybe 2 months ago. There was a petition here in Clark County for about the solar fields for the rural area. And you know what? About 100 to 150 people showed up at this commissioners meeting. And you're like, oh, they're starting to pay attention. And you had the people that were probably 70 people that were for, and they wore particular shirts to show that they were for or against it. And they had to make these elected officials look them in the eye and make a vote on this situation, because not only is it affecting the rural areas, but it's also, if you start to get educated about the people who make the decisions from Indianapolis to the counties to the municipalities of what's going on, things are going to start to change. There are great groups like Hoosier Action that have came into Southern Indiana, as well as Indivisible and different other groups, Do Something Indiana. They're going in there and saying, hey, do you know about the data center or the data center that is coming into your area? And we're a community, and also you have a voice in this situation. So it's the education piece that is starting to pick up. And I'm a big component of education and teaching individuals, hey, do you know this is going on? Or how do you feel about it? How do you want to react about it? Here's what you do to take the next step. And so I know we have a list of things to do today, but I've got a particular thing to share later on that we did just here in this community this week that is truly amazing about housing. But we'll get there.
I'm looking forward to hearing about that. And, just like the last thing on these data centers, I always like to tell people I am not a Luddite. I am not reflexively anti-AI. There are ways these things can be done responsibly. These data centers could theoretically be a boon in certain places if they're, say, built on, brownfields. They're built on old factory sites that aren't being used anymore. They can make that useful. If they're powered by renewable energy, if the water, is a closed loop system, if they actually pay their damn taxes, like, these things could be a benefit. But right now the corporations, they choose Indiana because our government is willing to give away the farm to them.
So, and I want to hint on the paying the taxes part. So if they are paying their fair share, that is more money in the bucket for the everyday Hoosiers. That is a return on education, a return on fixing your roads, a return on actually using correct development for housing. These are things that are structured. People want, we just watched, actually this week, Mandati Friday had a MSN interview. And what the people are saying is, we want to actually see our tax money at work. And so that's what you have to do at the State House is, if you're sitting on $5 billion of a surplus and the roads are not fixed, or you can't get into your rent is too high, or you can't get into a house, or you can't have adequate daycare, where's my taxes going to? So these are truly questions Hoosiers are starting to ask, like, where's the money going towards, and do I see it reflected in my community?
I don't get into fights with people, but I'll have back and forth online with folks, and they'll talk about, the budget surplus, like it's a great idea. Like, now listen, I understand having a rainy day fund,
yes,
but beyond a certain point, a surplus is money that is not being spent on public services. Chuck, I'm going to give you the last word here on these data centers here before we got to turn the corner.
Okay. So, I mean, again, I think Nick has hit it right on the nose. I mean, we the people have to demand the right actions at the right times, and that's what's going to motivate all of this to happen. I agree. We have surpluses, the surplus in the state right now to invest in so many different areas that would make viable impacts for basic human health and safety. I mean, Nick hit it, childcare, housing, hell, we could build, you could take one field that they're giving to a data center and build a tiny home community and take care of an unhoused community straight away.
Or build a daycare.
Or there you go. And, well, hell, build it together. I mean, shoot, one goes one with the other. You know what I'm saying? I mean, take care of the whole human experience instead of just treating it as a individual problem here, individual problem there. I mean, we as a people, we as Hoosiers can do more. We just have to force it to happen. And that education part that Nick is highlighting is absolutely vital. but then we have to take that education and make it to movable next progress steps. And again, progress is the key. We have to be progressive and push forward positively things that'll make good impacts for our communities.
I think of it the way like these corporations use Indiana is the same way I've heard that the oligarchs have used Ukraine. There's a phrase that they have over there is that we are the shit they grow their money in. That is how they look at us. Yeah. And, part of the way they enforce that dynamic is things like over policing and law enforcement. And to that effect, let's talk about ICE. Now, this is another thing Hoosiers do not want in their backyard. This week, 4 U.S. citizens testified at a House Democratic hearing about abuses at the hands of federal immigration agents. Among them, Miramar Martinez, shot 5 times by a Border Patrol agent in October 2025, who told lawmakers, quote, "My own government was calling me a domestic terrorist while she was held in federal detention with bullet wounds." Newly released police video captures an agent saying it's time to get aggressive moments before opening fire. A pastor testified that masked agents struck him in the head with 7 pepper balls while he protested outside a detention center. Stephen Miller and Tom Homan declined Democrats' invitation to testify. Republicans called the hearing a distraction. Meanwhile, the Senate passed a $70 billion budget resolution at 3:30 in the morning Thursday to fund ICE and Border Patrol for 3 years, bypassing the 60-vote filibuster threshold through budget reconciliation. While the rest of DHS, including TSA, remains unfunded and airport security lines remain backed up, though not nearly to the extent they were several weeks ago. And here in Indiana, of course, the Indy Star reported this week that DHS is actively seeking co-working space for hundreds of ICE personnel in 90 cities, including Indianapolis. Mayor Hogsett's office found out from the press, not the federal government. The agency already has an existing field office here, plus a recently leased Carmel location that was hidden from public lease databases. Congress handed ICE $75 billion through the One Big Beautiful Bill. There's a plan for 92,000 additional detention beds nationwide, and Indianapolis was previously considered for an 8,500-bed facility that Andre Carson says remains unresolved. The pattern is consistent: expand first, notify never. And Chuck, I keep coming back to this feeling that this is what 1936 must have felt like in Germany, the infrastructure of fascism quietly going up all around us while we all carry on as if it's business as usual. I don't know. What do you think?
It's disturbing to see what we have become or what we've permitted to become. This fear of anybody that's different from anybody else is just, it's fear mongering. And the problem with the thing I can't get my head wrapped around is, like, we see it so many times in TV shows and movies and this and that of, we see how these things are actually transpiring. And we're seeing it in real time, but yet people aren't making the connection of what is actually happening. So again, this comes back to an educational standpoint, teaching history, understanding what these steps are, and just basic bloody humanity. Nobody should be kept in cages or in detention centers or just not given due process for any wrong reason or purpose. That's not how this is not how this country was set up originally. Everybody gets should have their chance to come in and be a part of the country. That was how all of us got here, for God's sakes. It drives me nuts. But the thing of it is that we, again, have to take control of this stuff. We have to say, this is not what we want to happen. And how do we do that? By putting people in the right positions to get rid of this mess, to eliminate it. And the fact that the mayor of Indianapolis didn't realize anything was happening, I'm sorry, I would call that into huge question as to, okay, then what are you actually doing, dude? How do you not know these things are happening? That's kind of your job, is to know things.
Well, no, on one hand, it may be they're not telling him, but on the other hand, yeah, Joe Hogsett, I think, but doesn't know a lot of what's going on in the world. But Nick, They say the comment section isn't real life, and God, I hope that's true, because every post I see about the creeping ICE presence in Indiana is met with comments from Hoosiers, or at least bots posing as Hoosiers, welcoming it with open arms. What are the real people you're actually meeting saying about this?
So, you know me, I'm a story person. Everything, I feel it, I touch it, I see it. Okay. And so, our Clark County here is detaining individuals with immigration status, and we have a huge sheriff's race that is going on down here that now they have to start answering questions on both the Democratic side and the Republican side. What are you going to do about this situation, about detainment of immigrant people, with papers or without papers? They're being lawfully or unlawfully taken. And so the situation is now the hard questions have to be answered. And so we had a debate on Tuesday of the sheriff's race people, and they were talking about the due process and also telling we have to abide by the law. And if they need to be released, I will send the paperwork for them to be released. Okay. But you have people outstanding out there protesting this. And this is the situation. The fallout from the Jamie Knowles situation is the county lost a lot of money. So what did they do? We've got to recoup the money. So let's work with the federal government to detain people. And we get that federal funding to recoup that money. Business 101. All right. Now, let's go that's the business side of it. All right. Now let's talk about the seeing it and feeling it. I work in education, and so there's a partnership that had a English as second language, as well as getting people with their GEDs, a place over in Louisville that we were working with, and it went from in 2024 to 2025 to 50 to hundreds of people trying to get their GEDs or learn English as their second language and paying their taxes while they're here, to a hollow shell now. To where those individuals won't even show up anymore, and that program doesn't exist. These are individuals that were seeking the American dream, wanting to get an education, get their high school diploma, open that business, or get a job, and make sure that their families can make it. Because what are we here in America? We have that dream. We have that situation where we want to inspire something greater than ourselves. Immigrants came over here and saw that and saw a path forward. Even we escaped from the kings. We escaped from kings to make sure we wanted something better. We dreamed of something better. And now those individuals are hiding. So how do we get that back? We have to get to the end of this. I want to talk about the end of how we fix this. And we can fix that in November by establishing our vote, saying we want to reinstate that American dream that anyone can make it. We want to give you the options of being successful. And I've helped individuals get their GEDs, and I've helped American people get their GEDs. It doesn't matter who you are. If you want to do better in this country, you should have that option. And I know I feel like I'm preaching. Maybe I just had too many sermons this morning or too much coffee, but that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to push people to live the American dream. We're supposed to give them options and supposed to lift them up. And we shouldn't be bearing down on people. No one should be hit in the back of the head with pepper balls. No one should have bullet holes in them when they're trying to live the American dream. So I'm just going to say that.
Inshallah, Nick, we make it to November. I'm glad you mentioned the sheriff's race down there, because I wanted to talk about another corrupt Indiana sheriff. And over in Dubois County, Sheriff Tom Kleinhelter, Indiana's Law Enforcement Training Board this week rejected a settlement that would have let Kleinhelter keep his law enforcement certification until 2027, sending the case back for further review. And hours later, Governor Braun removed Kleinhelter from the very board that had been reviewing his own case. Now, Kleinhelter is the sheriff in Dubois County. That's Mike Braun's home county and was an early Braun endorser for governor. The settlement's fatal flaw, according to opponents, is that the board has held other officers accountable for the same violations without cutting deals and making an exception for an elected sheriff who happens to be tight with the governor, setting a troubling standard. Former Indiana State Police Superintendent Doug Carter didn't mince words. Quote, Mike Braun and Josh Kelly should have removed Kleinhelter months ago. And here's a fun wrinkle. Decertifying Kleinhelter won't actually remove him from office since his authority comes from being elected, not from his certification. He could remain sheriff without law enforcement credentials. Now, speaking of Braun creating favorable arrangements for his friends, Indiana lawmakers are raising questions this week about a newly created $210,000 special advisor position created for outgoing DCS Director Adam Krupp. No job description, never posted publicly. Billed to the DCS budget while reporting to the governor's office directly. Krupp, who basically disappeared for 3 months while collecting a government salary, terminated dozens of DCS frontline workers for, quote, operational efficiencies during his tenure. Now he gets a soft landing at full salary in a job that appears to have been created out of whole cloth specifically for him. And Nick, I might have missed this story if you hadn't flagged it. Did I get that right?
Yes. And so it was actually brought to one of our good friends to my attention because I'm everywhere. But it hit a nerve for me. And so Michelle Higgs said, hey, did you see this story? And I said, no, I missed it. And so she sent it over to me. And I said, let's reserve a little grace here to see what happens. OK. And then the story, what I sent you, came out. And so we have some questions. OK. And let me say, if you're cutting jobs in DCS before government efficiency, those are cases and children that those social workers have in their hands. As a child that was in the foster care system that had a great social worker and great foster parents that took care of me, that is extremely, I'm trying not to get upset. That's troubling. That is troubling because not only are those social workers fighting for those kids and having an attachment with those kids and the trauma that they see walking into homes that they might have seen abuse, neglect, or even worse. We just had a report of not too long ago of 2 infants having skull fractures. Yes, I went to the CASA event for Floyd County, and they were talking about that they have had cases where children with skull fractures, infants. And that's crazy. And now they're in the DCS's care. So you're telling me that a $210 salary, okay, going back to business, that the Appropriations Committee has not looked at, as Senator Foddy said, nor has anyone, I hope he's okay, the gentleman that's getting this position. I hope he's okay. He took a leave of absence, and I pray that he gets better. But no one's like, he gets to keep his 6-figure job. Okay. The other part is, let's talk about the average social worker in the state of Indiana makes between $45,000 to $47,000. That salary right there can take care of four social workers. Okay. That salary can take care of 4 social workers that can take a caseload from 15 to 20 children in the state, preventing those from going to the state's care, intervening while they're in state's care, or reunification. So that's what makes me a little bit mad is like, one, what are we doing? These are vulnerable children just like me that need to be helped. And I'm sitting here in a CASA Floyd event. Court-appointed special advocates is the name of CASA. That people are volunteering their time to fight for infants with cracked skulls. I hate to be so blunt about it, but they got cut by I found out that they were cut by the federal government too by at least 40%. So we've got to start really looking at what's going on in our state. And when I get up to Indianapolis, I'm going to request to be on the Child and Family Services committee, because we need to start looking at, okay, where's this money going? How are these children being helped? And how can we make sure that our state has success stories just like me? I'm I'm gonna step back a little bit because I get emotional about it.
No, I get it, and it's so upsetting. It's so upsetting, and the corruption from the Republican administrations in this state is a long-going problem. And Chuck, like, I don't know, man. Shouldn't you need to be a credentialed law enforcement officer to serve as a sheriff? It kind of seems important.
Yeah, well, you would think that would be kind of a basic crux to the idea, yes. The fact that, I mean, I believe that if you're going to serve in one of the highest law enforcement positions in a local government, you should actually have some law enforcement experience. But again, the way all that happened is absolutely, I don't know, mind-boggling. I don't know if it's a strong enough terminology, but the show favoritism of this person to say, okay, yeah, you can do this, but we're not going to do what we should. Why? Hold a higher standard. If you're going to hold a position in local government, you got to hold them to a higher standard. And if that standard's not being met, get rid of them. Impeach them, get them out, and put in somebody that needs to be there or that is qualified to be there. I'm actually encouraged to hear that Nick actually has got a sheriff's debate, because our sheriff's candidates on the Republican side here in Marion County won't have a debate. They just won't. It just won't happen for whatever reason. And it's like, okay, why? This is the time for you guys to talk about whatever your thoughts are going forward, but they're not putting it out. So it's just, again, it goes back to who's doing what for who.
And can I say something really quickly?
Yeah.
I want to applaud the law enforcement and the individuals who are doing the right thing, and they're getting a bad rap for this, right? And so that's the situation we have to recognize as well, is everybody's being labeled by one individual's decision. We've had this down here. Of course, it splintered out a little bit too in Clark County, but the ones who are doing the right thing are getting a bad rap for this. They are out there in the community. Law enforcement, EMS, firefighters are out there taking care of overdoses, making sure the streets are safe, and helping connect individuals with the things that they need to be citizens in the state, also in the county. It is a hard job, but things like this give them a bad rap. And so then what does that do? That erodes the public's trust with them. And so, what I do as a father is I tell my son, when you see officer, go introduce yourself. Go introduce yourself, because I want you to know that they're here to protect and serve you. Okay? Because if there's something I can't do at the time, you need to call 911, that they're going to be able to help you. And so we've got to build that public trust back again. And it's with good officers. And I will applaud. There was one candidate at the debate, and he said, quote, "I'm here." Actually, both of them said this. Said, quote, "I'm here. Look at the person or the people that are not here. And I'm standing on business, and it's time for us to have a change, because this isn't working." And so he was a law enforcement person, and he's getting a bad rap, but he did everything correctly, right? And so did that other candidate as well.
When you see this corruption problem we have in not just Clark County, not just Dubois County, there have been multiple counties where we've had corrupt sheriffs, and you always hear from the big law enforcement backers that are like, "Oh, it's just one bad apple." What's the second half of that saying? One bad apple spoils the whole bunch. Let's move on and talk about some corruption elsewhere in the state. And now, we've just detailed some questionable dealings from the Braun administration. They'd like you to know that they are very concerned about corruption, at least in some places, particularly when it comes to people receiving Medicaid services. Now, the Braun administration's Family and Social Services Administration is seeking $200 million in repayments from the state's 5 largest attendant care providers after audits found errors in nearly every Medicaid claim reviewed, including missing background checks, billing for unauthorized services, and at least one case where a company's own COO was listed as the patient. The audit was triggered by an unexplained $150 million surge in Medicaid claims between 2021 and 2022. At least one provider is pushing back hard, warning that prepayment review could create a cash flow crisis for a business paying hundreds of employees every 2 weeks. This is all happening against a backdrop of 400,000 Hoosiers already removed from Medicaid rolls, with work requirements set to kick in January 1st that could cut even more. Staying on the health care front, the Indiana Supreme Court announced it will take up the religious freedom challenge to Indiana's near-total abortion ban directly, bypassing the Court of Appeals, with oral arguments set for September. A Marion County court already found the ban imposes a substantial burden on religious exercise under Indiana's own Religious Freedom Restoration Act, the same framework Republicans championed. The case was brought on behalf of 5 anonymous women and Hoosier Jews for Choice. Chuck, how ironic would it be if the RFRA law pushed by Mike Pence winds up being the undoing of the state's abortion ban?
Something about poetic justice kind of resonates here with this one particularly. And again, I'm married into my wife's Jewish, so I understand the principles behind it. You can't hide one religious doctrine to cover everyone. I mean, that's the whole idea of freedom of religion or from religion. And I think, again, we were talking about irony earlier in the show, and I think it is a beautiful irony that this might actually be the downfall of this particular course of action until they figure out some other way to squirrel it away, because they're not going to give up on it, obviously. But I think Nick hit at one other point that in child care, family services, CASA, DCS, that's cradle to grave services that we need to have. So again, it kind of goes back to, hey, if we're gonna be pro-life, then let's be pro-life the whole way through the system.
Yep.
Invest in that reality, and not just give it lip service. And that's what I'm hoping. This may start pushing that envelope. If this actually goes in the right direction, which it should, then maybe we can start having those in-depth conversations and start turning a corner on this. Hopefully, once we get great people in place like Nick start smacking them around in the legislature a little bit.
Well, yeah, and from
Nick,
birth to death, right? You said like taking care of folks the whole life. A lot of the folks, or many folks who rely on these attendant care providers are folks who are in hospice care and want to go peacefully at home and stay in their own home as long as they can, right? And Nick, if we're to believe the state, these attendant care providers were bilking Indiana's Medicaid system. The people really getting squeezed are the ones who can least afford it, right? It's the patients who depend on those services. And also the home care aides actually doing the work, who are some of the most exploited and poorly paid workers in the entire economy. What do you make of all that?
So what came to mind is there was a song in the 90s. We know the lyrics. Isn't it ironic? Don't you think? We won't sing it together.
Nice.
But we know that song. No copyright infringements too. So let's, once again, I feel it, I touch it, and I see it. Okay. And so, I'm going to say this first. My opponent, who is going to be in the Journal, passed the new Senate Bill 1, which was fraud and abuse. Okay. All right, cool. Aaron, Scott, I'm gonna ask you this question. Give me those years again. When did that fraud happen? When did that fraud happen?
Apparently 2021, 2022.
Okay, this is gonna be a back and forth with us, okay? Who was in charge?
Oh, Republicans have been in charge of this state for 20 plus years now, Nick.
Okay, and then what happened when what happened with the Medicaid shortfall?
Actually, you're gonna tell me about that one.
Okay, so the Medicaid shortfall too was underneath them as well. Okay. And so we talk about fraud and abuse, and the people they hired to look at this messed up on the numbers. Okay. If I mess up on my numbers and my budget, and it's going to mess up a lot of things in my house. Okay. In a bill, but they got paid. They made the mistake. Who was it underneath? They didn't go after them. So that is a real question we have to educate the people too. Okay, it was underneath your administration. It happened under you. So now People got to foot the bill. All right. The other part, this is the feeling and the hearing part. So I'm in a meet and greet, and I met with one of the individuals that is part of Lifespan down here. And he's talking about that he gets Medicaid and helps with Medicaid situations. And he has an 8-year-old that they're trying to get this paperwork done. And so much paperwork and bureaucracy has been put in that this child has a feeding tube and other disabilities that they are trying to fight and get work for. But they are caught up in the paperwork. And he said, it crushes me that this is happening. And then another one, I was doing a phone call about 3 to 4 months ago. And I might have told you this story, Scott. They said, Nick, I know you. I was like, okay, cool. But what's going on and how can I help? They said, I'm 70 years old. I take care of my 62-year-old sister. She has severe disabilities. I've been waiting for Medicaid to help us out because she needs occupational therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy. I need some bills paid. And every time I call up there, I get a voicemail or I don't get a return call or I've got more paperwork to do. This is what's going on. And I said, I want to help you. I can connect you to this. She goes, no, Nick, I need you to fix this shit. Sorry for my language on Sunday. She goes, I need you to fix this shit. And so I go, and I need you to get up there to Indianapolis to fix this. And so this is what's going on in our community. Even though this is not, my opponent is a Republican for the general, this is a Democratic person in the area. All right. That if I'm going to help, no matter who you are, Democratic, Republican, if it's going to help you get the resources you need to be successful, that is my job as a state legislator, is to make sure that we are representing all constituents in our districts and the state of Indiana. So this is the part of the feel, the hear, and the seeing that is going on the ground. And people are visibly frustrated about this situation. So, and I'll touch a little bit on the abortion situation. Now, this is, if it does get overturned, here's what the people have a chance of. If you put individuals, elected people like me, and the Secretary of State's race, we will be able to work with that office, the election division, and be able to put that on the ballot and let the Hoosiers decide. I saw you were talking about Virginia earlier, where they got to do the redistricting thing. Even though it came out 51-49, they got to choose. Other states have gotten to choose from redistricting to abortion on what they want to do. So that is what we're supposed to do as a democracy, is let people make a decision. So if you elect me, and if you elect other individuals that are going to put these things on the ballot, you have a voice of where the direction goes, the state of Indiana goes. That's what I have to say.
It's going to be a big lift, but we need to get it done. It's just the right thing to do. Let's talk about. I'm going to change direction here. You know, we were just talking about the abortion ban and the same strain of radical Christian nationalism that drove Mike Pence's Religious Freedom Restoration Act, the very law now being used to challenge the ban, is alive and well in Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith's office. Now, this week, he called the Westfield High School indoor percussion ensemble spring show, quote, demonic filth, and urged parents to pull their kids out of public schools using vouchers. Now, the show in question is a classical music performance built around the opera Carmen, pieces performed by high school ensembles across the country. Beckwith's specific objection is that Carmen depicts adultery. The backlash has been swift. The mayor of Westfield, the school district, and the Indiana Percussion Association all issued statements defending the band, which has rallied community support under the hashtag Standing Rock Strong. They're called the Shamrocks there at Westfield. Now, this is Beckwith's second public conflict with Westfield schools. He previously threatened to defund the district after being disinvited from an appearance, and this comes just days after Beckwith called Valparaiso Community Schools woke after its superintendent apologized that students were offended by individual conversations Beckwith initiated after a career fair appearance. And he demanded the superintendent resign, despite the fact that the superintendent had already announced he's leaving July 1st. Beckwith's official bio, read aloud before he spoke at that event, included the phrase, "fighting the woke agenda." Chuck, this guy is a joke, and he'd be a funny joke if he weren't so dangerous.
Absolutely. And again, this comes down to the simple understanding. Well, this guy has, I don't know if he has all his screws tied in tight at this point. And in fact, I would say he's probably missing a few at this point. But
I've heard Micah has extra screws, if you know what I'm saying.
I probably teed that up probably wrong. But yeah, this Christian nationalistic viewpoint that he espouses, that's not Christianity. I mean, let's just be straight about it. It has nothing to do with the actual religion itself. It's just this weird subculture thing that he's seeming to embrace. And the fact that he's calling out children performing a piece that has been a part of high school band performances for, I don't know, ever. Why is this a big deal? Oh, wait a minute. He just wanted to pick on another form of expression. And it's sad. I mean, it'd be comical. You're right. He's dangerous. It would be funny if it wasn't so darn dangerous. But there again, I don't know if anybody truly can take the guy seriously.
You know, Nick, if Micah is offended by the prurient nature of 19th century classical music, he should see some of the stories in the Bible.
So, as a Christian and a person of faith, my job is to share my faith, not push my faith. Okay. And so, and while it is, I'm going to say this, it says for these type of things to call it out in the Bible. All right. For this type of behavior. Okay. But I want to do this as a person of faith. I told you about the situation we took care of here in Clark County. My faith is to serve, okay, and to help people. So during a town hall, a citizen came to me and said, "Have you heard what's going on in Claysburg's Tower, now known as Miranda?" I said, "No, please tell me." And they said, "Well, there is drug use, assaults of physically and also some sexual assaults that are going on, people breaking in, as well as people sleeping in the stairwells who are homeless, and the people in the community don't feel safe there." I said, "Oh my gosh, okay, let me see what I can do." Okay. And so I said, okay. So I went to my city council person. I said, "Have you heard about this?" They said, "No, I haven't." And so I said, and so me and him formulated a plan, council person Evan Stoner. We went to the Miranda, formerly known as the Claysburg Tower, and we sat down with the people for about an hour and said, "Tell us what's going on." And they shared stories that are heartbreaking. Okay. Heartbreaking. So then after me and Evan met those people there, we sat and talked and said, "What are we going to do?" Evan said, "I'm going to take care of this." What he do? He talked to it's a big apartment complex. He called them in Colorado because they own different buildings in the United States, and started a dialogue for them with over a month. And the people are just asking for basic securities and for those doors to be locked and for them to live in safety. It is a very lower social economical status situation, but they should deserve to live in safety. So after a month of talking with this corporation, and they did nothing. And so Evan took to social media and said, "This is what's going on. This is how we're going to do it. I'm creating a space for individuals to come and feel in safe and talk about what's going on at the Miranda, or formerly known as Claysburg Tower." Tuesday, it's been a busy week. Tuesday, wait a second. No, sorry, Thursday. Sorry, it has been a very busy week. Thursday, over 50 people in this community showed up, and they shared their stories of what is going on in there. The assistant chief of police showed up. The council person that was in that district showed up. There were different council members, county council members, and people in the community from churches that are talking about this situation about how it's affecting both the community and the people living there. Now, is that woke? Is that woke what we did? Is that, and tell me that. We're supposed to serve everybody. Everybody's supposed to feel safe. And these individuals that were doing this performance thought they were feeling safe, and now they feel not so safe. So my thing is, that is all a distraction. That is all noise. Get down with the people and truly figure out what's going on in your community. Serve the people and start, once again, like Mandani said, people want to see reflection in their community of what's going on. And you take that step from one conversation to people, over 50 people showing up in the room on Thursday, to getting solutions done with the police, with the complex, with the churches, and with the people in the community, because it was unsafe for individuals, and we want everybody to live in dignity. So if that's woke, then I'm crazy.
Well, that's what it's supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about, public service. It's supposed to be about serving your neighbors. It's not supposed to be about promoting yourself, which seems to be what Micah Beck was really good at. Speaking of one of the recurring elected Republican heels that keep popping up in this space, another one is at it this week. Republican Secretary of State Diego Morales. Now, he is being challenged in the Republican primary and is also facing an independent bid from the former Republican mayor of Indianapolis, Greg Ballard, running under the new Lincoln Party. This is in addition to whoever secures the Democratic nomination. Now, this week, Ballard's campaign is blaming Morales for a 3-week delay in providing portal login credentials that prevented him from filing his first quarter finance report on time, forcing the campaign to release its numbers via press release. Morales' office fired back, saying it has no involvement in campaign finance reporting. Pretty sure that's one of their main jobs. The bipartisan Indiana election division says the blame rests with the Ballard campaign. Ballard's campaign disputes that, saying they tried for weeks to get access. The irony is almost too thick to cut. A candidate running against the incumbent Secretary of State for incompetent election administration got tangled up in what his campaign is calling the incumbent's incompetent election administration. Meanwhile, the May 5th primary is just days away, and the 7th Circuit reinstated Indiana's student ID voting ban on an emergency motion this week, putting between 40 and 90,000 voters back in legal limbo with early voting already underway. The state's election integrity argument has a glaring hole. Military IDs, VA cards, tribal IDs without expiration dates all still qualify, while student IDs, which have worked without incident for decades, were singled out as insufficiently rigorous. A reasoned decision from the appeals court was promised within 2 business days. 6 days ago. Still haven't seen one. Nick, early voting has been underway for weeks, and we're still haggling in federal court over what kind of ID is valid. How is that acceptable?
It's not acceptable. As elected officials and serving your community, there should be clear, a precise message that what's going on. Okay. With that, I know I don't have a primary, but I'm treating it like it's a primary, and I'm telling every individual to go out there to vote, make a plan, make sure you can get to the polls. If you're in Clark County, you're going to go to the courthouse, and if you're in Floyd County, which is a part of my district too, there's 4 separate areas you can early vote. Also, absentee ballot, I think it's getting ready to wrap up too here as well. The other part is if you got an in-person vote, go on May 5th, okay? And make sure, you have your time that take a couple hours out of your work day to make sure it's taken care of, or, just to make sure you get there in time, because the polls close at 6 p.m., okay? Which is crazy because a lot of people get off at 6 p.m. So What can we do to make these things better in the state of India? We are dead last, isn't that correct, in voting?
50 out of 51.
Yeah. But I want to say that I'm optimistic. There's no other way but up, right? We have to go up, all right? Or we stay the same, but we can go up. And so with that, we have this opportunity, and we are showing where the Secretary of State office is lacking. We have an option. I don't have a vote in this because I am not a delegate between Bo or Blythe, okay? So with that, whoever comes out of that situation, we have a better option. All right. So if we're going to fix these things, we have to make sure that not only is the state legislator working with the election division to make sure everything is taken care of and there's a clear, precise messaging out there, that we extend the time on voting. To make sure that everything, all the IDs are properly good. What is there's not that much fraud going on here. So with that, you have an opportunity to fix this. You have the ability to write this story, and the end of it can be amazing after November. So
yes, it can.
Once again, we have no other choice but go up. So look at it that way.
Chuck, real quick, make this a quick one, but Diego Morales' incompetence knows no bounds. The incumbent may very well finish third this November if he even survives his own party's convention.
Yeah, and again, the poetic justice, irony, take your pick. But I mean, I agree with Nick. I mean, no matter how the Secretary of Race pans out, we're going to have a better option because anything has got to be better than what we have. And I firmly believe expanding voting opportunities instead of contracting them like they continually try to do is definitely a way forward for anybody that takes over the office and to make it work better. So yeah, I'd love to see. I'd be doing if Diego got thrown out on his tail end. That would not break my heart in the slightest.
Not in the least. So let me end on a light note this week. And finally, First Lady Melania Trump announced a new White House beehive shaped like the executive mansion, timed to the state visit of the UK's King Charles and Queen Camilla, both committed beekeepers, adding about 30 pounds of annual honey production to the existing hive's 200 to 225 pounds. The program dates to 2009 under Michelle Obama and produces clover honey used for White House meals, official gifts, and food bank donations. This is a good use of Melania's time because if there's one thing she knows, it's a honeypot operation. All right, let's wrap this thing up. Before we go, I want to give our guests time to shamelessly promote themselves. Chuck, where can the people find you?
So you can find me at HancockCountyDemocrats.com. Go there for all of our great information. We do have a speaker series session tomorrow night at 7 p.m. with Cindy Worth, where we'll do a one-on-one interview and have some time with her. So please, and we've also got up on our YouTube channel, if you check out Hancock County Democrats, we have our speaker series that we've done. And then we also have the 6th district candidate debates that we hosted here in the county. So a lot of good things. Just check us out there and look forward to talking to everybody again.
Thank you, Chuck. Nick, how about you? Where can the good folks find you? Maybe learn more about that campaign.
Yes. And so one, I want to say the other good thing that Melania does, she does champion kids in foster care. So I'll give that to her too as well. And also the connection point between me and you, Chuck. I'm from Hancock County, Kentucky. So Hancock County in the name. But I will wrap up this. If you want to flip this seat in 2026, you can go to HoosiersForNickMarshall.com. And what you'll do, you can be able to volunteer, sign up to volunteer, donate, or spread the good message that we have no other choice but to go up. You have the advantage of making this story an amazing story, just like mine from the foster care system to the ballot. That is an amazing story. And most people don't have the ability to do this, but it's very simple. So I want to inspire people to let them know that we can change Indiana. If I can change, you can change. The power is in you. So go to HoosiersForNickMarshall.com so we can flip this seat and make this state and this district a better for everybody. Thank you very much, Scott, for the last minute.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Nick. All right. Of course, folks, you can find them. You can find me on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at whosleft.us and on Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube at Who's Left. Send me a DM with feedback. I'm back tonight at 7 p.m. for a PIN virtual town hall with 9th District Congressional candidate Brad Meyer. I've got another one of those next Sunday with one of his opponents in that race, Dr. Tim Peck. They'll both take your questions directly in the live chat. I've also got 2 live recordings of the Who's Left podcast this week. Tuesday night at 7 with Carla Lopez Owens, candidate for Marion County Clerk. And Thursday, our friend Destiny from this morning is back with me for a one-on-one. Also on Progressive Indiana Network this week, Derek Holder has 4 candidate interviews on the Hold 'em Accountable podcast, including a rare appearance by a Republican on our podcast feed. The Concerned Clergy podcast drops every Thursday morning, and Brianna Newhart, the Recovered Republican, has new content Saturday. We can't do all this without you, so please support our work with a paid subscription at progressiveindiana.net. Once again, thanks to Destiny Wells, Chuck Gill, and Nick Marshall for joining us today. Donate and volunteer for the candidates. Like, share, comment, and leave a review for us. Let's keep building a radically democratic Indiana together. Until next time, I'm Scott Aaron Rogers, signing off from Bloomington. Love each other, Indiana.